I've been thinking.
Yeah?
Something positive. Maybe it's time.
Now is literally the worst time.
Well, it'd be a new start for us, and for me, I would have a real purpose.
A child is not a hobby.
Not a hobby, an inspiration.
We could have had this fight 4 hours ago. I'm late.
Stroking his wife Amy Dunne's head, Nick Dunne soliloquizes,
When I think of my wife, I always think of her head. I picture cracking her lovely skull, unspooling her brains, trying to get answers. The primal questions of any marriage. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? What have we done to each other?
To understand how we got here, we have to go back to the beginning. It's Nick and Amy's 5th anniversary, but Nick doesn't seem to be in a celebratory mood. He pays a visit to the bar, a place he and his twin sister, Margot, run. On the 8th of January 2005, Amy meets the ever-sweet Nick, which she makes sure to note in her diary. It feels as though they're made for each other, the connection real and perfect. They're both writers, and soon enough, they take things to the next level. Back in the present, Nick and Margot play a game while talking about Amy's anniversary treasure hunts. They used to be fun, but it has now become something exhausting for Nick, since all Amy does is try to prove how shitty of a husband he is. A call comes in from the neighbor, Walt, and Nick leaves. When he arrives home, he finds their cat outside and thanks Walt for calling. Inside, he calls out for Amy but gets silence. When he finds the coffee table overturned and broken, with chairs scattered as though there was a struggle, he becomes confused. Some moments later, Detective Rhonda and Officer James arrive, responding to Nick's call. He welcomes them in, saying,
I don't know where my wife is, and I came home to this. Now, I don't panic easily, but it's weird, right?
Showing them around, he explains that they moved to Missouri 2 years ago because his mom got sick. Unfortunately, she passed away. They used to live in New York. When they get to the kitchen, Rhonda suddenly pauses, then places a sticker beside what looks like a blood splatter on the cabinet. At Amy's office, she realizes Amy is the famous author of Amazing Amy. On the 24th of February 2007, Amy writes in her diary, revealing she's getting married. The night doesn't start as anything special for her since the focus is all on Amazing Amy. Amazing Amy got everything real Amy didn't, and her parents, Rand and Mary Beth Elliott, never fail to make everything about themselves. All that ends when Nick interrupts her interview with the most authentic proposal ever. She happily agrees, sealing it with a kiss. Back in the present, Nick is taken to the station, where his samples are collected. Rhonda wants to treat the case as a missing persons case. She says,
We're tracking Amy's phone, her credit cards. We will organize searches, put up flyers. We're going to hold a press conference tomorrow.
Nick is given the option to call a lawyer, but he declines. Since he owns the bar and also teaches creative writing, Rhonda asks what Amy does. Nick can't point to anything, nor does he know any friend Amy has in town. He doesn't know her blood type, and he hasn't called her parents yet. He seems to be living up to the shitty husband Amy describes. Rhonda tells him to call, and he does, handing her the phone when Mary Beth asks to speak with her. He becomes surprised and confused when he sees his father, Bill, at the station. Apparently, Bill wandered out of Comfort Hill, a home for the elderly, and was found walking on the street disoriented. Rhonda tells Nick to drive him back, and he drops Bill at Comfort Hill. On the 5th of July 2009, Amy writes that her marriage with Nick has been going smoothly. 2 years feel like 2 months. Back in the present, Nick spends the night at Margot's because forensics are at his place. He tells her about Amy, making her worried. Even though she doesn't really like Amy, she still cares. Soon after, Rhonda and James arrive at the house, and a woman named Noelle, who lives down the street, calls out, claiming she's Amy's best friend. Now this is getting interesting. Rhonda promises to speak to her later before checking in with the forensics. The blood splatter has been confirmed and a luminol sweep has been ordered. James receives feedback on his phone, and he says,
House is rented in her name. Cars in her name, credit cards, utilities, phone bill, all in her name. Even his bar is in her name.
In the bedroom, Rhonda finds their first clue in the drawer, a letter marked Clue 1. The next morning, Nick and Margot head to the station, where Rand and Mary Beth await. Soon, they all head to the hall for the press conference. Nick goes first, making a short speech before stepping aside. Rand and Mary Beth take over, their speech much more emotional. Unlike Mr. Husband, the reporters take their final pictures, and one tells Nick to smile, making him strike a weird pose before leaving. Afterward, Rand and Mary Beth open up to Rhonda about an obsessed ex-boyfriend of Amy's, Desi Collings. He attempted to take his life after Amy broke up with him in their sophomore year. They even had to file a restraining order. He recently moved to St. Louis, about 2 hours away. When Rand and Mary Beth leave, Rhonda calls Nick in and says,
Imagine our confusion, missing persons case, and in your wife's dressing room we find an envelope marked Clue.
Nick identifies it as part of their anniversary treasure hunts, but Rhonda thinks solving it might help track Amy's movements. Nick agrees, and when he reads it, he instantly knows the room. He He takes her to his office. Lo and behold, Clue 2 sits pretty on the desk. It talks about heading to a little brown house where they can do some naughty roleplay. Rhonda finds red underwear in the office, but Nick denies knowing anything about it, attributing it to Amy's clues. Rhonda bags it, then asks about the brown house. This time, Nick claims not to know, so she takes the letter. However, for someone who has no idea, Nick drives straight to his father's house after leaving the station. When he enters, the alarm blares, refusing to stop even after he inputs the code. A call comes from the security company, and Nick sees Clue 3. Spotting a police car outside, he pockets the envelope. Rhonda comes in, wondering what he's doing, but he claims he checks on the place weekly. When she steps outside, she flashes her torch on the building, noting it might be the little brown house from the clue Nick insists it's still blue before driving away. But Rhonda doesn't believe him for a second. On the 18th of July, 2010, Amy writes about the recession. Nick fears he'll be laid off, but Amy isn't bothered. She assures him they have each other. She tells him her parents want to borrow almost $1 million from her trust fund. She's already agreed. Nick isn't pleased since she didn't tell him first. Amy feels it's technically their money, and he eventually agrees. Later, he does get laid off. He pours his time into video games and spends money they should be saving. They argue, and Nick accuses her of not trusting him, bringing up the prenup. Frustrated, she says,
Nick, I don't get it. I don't get why you're daring me to be someone I don't want to be. The nagging shrew, the controlling bitch. I'm not that person. I'm your wife.
He apologizes, blaming his behavior on unemployment. Back in the present, it's been 2 days since Amy went missing. A search party gathers, almost the whole town participating. Rhonda asks Nick about Noelle, but he doesn't know her as Amy's best friend. Outside the hall, a woman acts friendly toward him and even makes him take a selfie. However, Nick realizes his mistake, and when he asks her to delete it, she blatantly refuses. That will definitely hit the media. At the house, Rhonda asks an officer about some new items she saw on a receipt, but none are found in the house. That evening, the news discusses Nick's pose at the press conference. Margot quickly switches off the TV when Nick walks in. On the 23rd of September 2010, Amy writes that they moved to Missouri because of Nick's mom's cancer. Nick is happy to be home, but Amy isn't sure he's happy to be back with her. Back in the present, Nick gets a visit from Andy, his girlfriend. He's been having an affair for over 1.5 years and was planning to divorce Amy. Even though Margot is asleep inside, Nick and Andy begin making out in the sitting room. He just moved to the top of the suspect list. On the 2nd of October 2011, Amy writes, Nick's mom has passed. To make him happy, Amy uses the last of her trust fund to buy him a bar, but it has only been draining money. He uses her when he wants and ignores her otherwise. She brings up childbirth, thinking it's time, but Nick disagrees. When she tries stopping him from leaving, he pushes her, making her hit her head on the banister. That's when she realizes she's frightened of her own husband. Back in the present, Rhonda and James head to an abandoned building used for underground business. Rhonda shows Amy's picture to one of the men. He instantly recognizes her, saying,
She wanted a gun. I told her it's not my thing. I felt bad, though. She seemed really desperate. Said it needed to be small so she could keep it close.
Things are spiraling. On the 14th of February 2012, Amy writes, she admits she bought a gun for Valentine's. She feels Nick wants her gone, but won't ask for a divorce because she owns his bar. Then there's also the prenup. Back in the present, 3 days have passed. Nick wakes up with Andy after their night together and tries rushing her out before Margot wakes up. Too late, Margot sees everything. She confronts him and he admits the truth. Andy is in her early 20s and one of his students. Trusts Nick to blame his actions on how terrible Amy made him feel. Margot can't believe him and goes ahead to show him what the news is saying. The selfie with the woman is online, and Ellen, the host, discusses it. Tanner Bolt, a defense attorney, joins the show and argues in Nick's favor, saying people show grief differently and insisting on innocent until proven guilty. Margot thinks Nick needs to hire Tanner and tells him to go home. At the station, Rhonda receives the luminol results. A profuse blood smear on the kitchen floor. It's Amy's blood type. DNA should be ready soon. Trajectory shows blunt force, suggesting a club or 2x4. During the vigil that night, Nick gives a heartfelt speech. To sell it, he even speaks directly to Amy, assuring her of his love. But he spots Andy among the crowd, and the hurt girl mouths a curse at him. The crowd is moved as he rounds up his speech, but this all goes down the drain when Noelle yells out,
What did you do to your pregnant wife?
He tries resuming his speech, but Noelle doesn't let him. She says,
Tell him that, Nick. You tell him Amy was 6 weeks pregnant.
Now this is an unexpected revelation. Everyone is shocked by this, and Nick has no choice but to leave the stage. However, the people go into a frenzy and they begin following him, paparazzi asking all sorts of questions. Thankfully, Rhonda sends James after Nick, and he is safely taken away in the police car. At home, Rhonda questions Nick about this, but he still insists Noelle is a crazy woman who isn't even close to Amy. It's definitely the opposite, and Rhonda shows him some pictures of the besties. Nick is at a loss for words, but still feels it doesn't prove Amy's pregnancy. Well, her medical reports will determine that. Deciding to talk about the crime scene, Rhonda shows him how staged the place looked. She also reveals the blood from the luminol test, making Nick surprised. The icing on the cake? The blood was actually mopped. Rhonda says,
Blood and no body suggests kidnapping. Tells us to look at people outside the house. Pool of blood and no body suggests homicide. It tells us to look at people inside the house.
She wonders how his marriage was, showing him the evidence of his finances. He has $117,000 in credit card debt, which has gone towards fun little splurges, and Nick is shocked and denies buying anything, but Rhonda and James don't believe him. She brings out the life insurance document, revealing he bumped up Amy's life insurance to $1.2 million. Nick reveals it was Amy's idea, getting really frustrated. It turns into anger when Rhonda gets feedback and reveals Amy was pregnant, making him smash a glass on the floor. He tells her,
I don't want to talk to you again without a lawyer.
Later, Margot arrives at his house, ignoring the paparazzi packed full outside. She points out how wrong everything seems, urging him to talk to her. And he admits he didn't tell her Amy didn't want kids because Amy didn't want him to. He reveals he went to a fertility clinic when they first moved to town because he wanted kids, but Amy didn't follow through when it was time for her test. The stories are definitely not aligning. Nick shows Margot a letter from the clinic, and she realizes he was already with Andy from the date. However, Nick just says he wanted a baby with Amy. Looking through the box he got the letter from, Margot sees the third clue he couldn't solve. A letter from Desi, the rich boyfriend who would do anything for Amy, and the prenup. It's just like a little box of hate, and Nick angrily admits that he might hate Amy after all. After Margot leaves, Nick begins trying to solve the third clue. Meanwhile, Rhonda and James search Bill's house, trying to find out why Nick was there. They take the search down to the basement, and just as Nick solves the clue, Rhonda discovers Amy's diary in the fireplace. Though the diary has been burnt a bit, the pages are still intact. Nick escapes through the back and runs all the way to a woodshed. When he opens the door and turns on the light, he sees the numerous items Rhonda was talking about, and a gift box, leaving him beyond shocked. The next morning, everything fits into place, and Amy reveals herself. Driving away, she soliloquizes,
Nick Dunne took my pride and my dignity and my hope and my money. He took and took from me until I no longer existed. That's murder. Let the punishment fit the crime.
Apparently, to achieve her aim, she faked everything. Firstly, befriend a local idiot, create money troubles, bump up life insurance, purchase a cheap getaway car in cash. She even faked the pregnancy record by stealing Noelle's urine. The woman really planned the whole thing out. As soon as Nick leaves the house on the morning of their anniversary, she begins her plan. She stages the crime scene, then begins drawing a lot of blood from her veins. That done, she pours it all over the kitchen floor, then cleans it poorly. Coating a club in blood, she leaves it inside the fireplace to be discovered as the murder weapon. Even the diary is part of the plan. Though the beginning parts are true since they were fairy tale days, the other parts are inventories. Writers are definitely dangerous people. Amy burns the diary to the right amount, making sure to put it in a way the cops will find. She also plans to go out on the water with a handful of pills and a pocket full of stones, and everyone will think Nick dumped his wife like garbage when her body is eventually found. Cutting and dyeing her hair, she feels Nick and Amy never existed in the first place. Nick wanted a cool girl and Amy was willing to try. Though she enjoyed it, she also inspired him to rise to her level. They were happy pretending to be other people, but he got lazy, ruined her life, and found himself a younger, cool girl. No woman should take that, right? Amy secures her cash under the bed of her new apartment, then goes to the bathroom to complete her mission. Taking a hammer to her face, she hits the side of her eye. The lengths this woman is willing to go to. That evening, Nick shows Margot the numerous items in the woodshed, making her shocked. With the latest improvements, she thought Nick was actually guilty, and Nick assures her he would have thought so too. Who wouldn't? They take the gift box inside, and Margot begins reading the note. It's the Punch and Judy puppets, and Nick realizes Amy wants him to go to prison. He reveals,
The morning of our anniversary, I was gonna ask her for a divorce. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't fake it for another year, another day.
However, before he could say anything, she told him to go somewhere and think about their marriage. When he got home, she was gone. They take out the puppets, and Margot points out that Punch beat Judy to her end, also ending their unborn child. Realizing what Amy's endgame is, Margot wonders if Missouri has the death penalty. The next day, Amy draws the attention of Greta, a neighbor who feels they're going to be best friends. 2 days later, Greta meets her up by the pool, noticing the bruise on her eye. She feels it's from a man since her boyfriend Jeff also beats her. After she guesses some most likely scenarios, Amy finally opens up to her saying, Turns out she secretly watched him kiss Andy the very same way he kissed her the first night they met. Guess that sealed her decision. The next day, Nick takes a flight to go see Tanner. When Tanner hears the whole story, he bursts out laughing from how crazy it is. He's in, ready to win the case with his $100,000 retainer. To prepare Nick's defense, they'll need to realign the public's perception of Amy. They'll also need other voices she screwed with in the past. Nick mentions a guy named Tommy O'Hara, who Amy pressed charges against 8 years ago. In no time, Tanner brings up Tommy's information and tells Nick to go talk to him while he draws up the contract. Afterward, Nick meets up with Tommy in a bar, and Tommy reveals Amy framed him for sexual assault. On the show, Ellen criticizes Nick to the lowest, even involving Margot. Amy watches this at home with Greta, the turn of events making her really happy. Afterward, she calls in the activity on Margot's woodshed. While going back home, Nick stops by Desi's house, hoping to get his own side of the story, but Desi doesn't cooperate and closes the gate on his face. The next day, Tanner arrives in Missouri and he goes over everything with Nick and Margot at her apartment. They decide to go check for the clue which leads to Bill's house. However, they are not prepared to see the place all taped up by the police. Tanner just says,
"Whatever they found, I think it's safe to assume that it's very bad."
Well, it's definitely more than bad. At a cafe, the three of them go over the case, and Tanner brings up Andy. She's bound to go public soon, so they need to come clean to the cops about her. They also need to tell the cops about the woodshed, so they can be on the front end of it. However, Tanner reveals this will make everyone go after Margot, since they'll think she's Nick's accomplice. That night, Amy's wad of cash mistakenly falls out of her body in front of Greta and Jeff, and the two immediately notice. Safe to say she's landed in trouble. The next day, Tanner tells Nick about a plan. He wants him to go on a show with a host named Sharon Schieber and confess about Andy. Margot feels people will hate Nick, but Tanner is sure they'll forgive him afterwards. Trying to convince him, Tanner says,
"Nick, this case is about what people think of you. They need to like you. Now you do this and you will reach millions of those people."
Meanwhile, Amy has decided to leave her mini apartment since she's no longer safe. She begins wiping down the place to clear her prints, but Greta and Jeff stop by, halting her plans. They forcefully take her money, leaving Amy beyond frustrated. On the morning of the live show, Tanner goes over the possible questions to prepare Nick for the way he'll put his story out for the world. Amy comes up with a plan B, and she contacts Desi, setting up a meeting in a bar. She makes sure to appear her part and begins filling his head with her lies about the whole situation, painting Nick in the most horrible light. Instantly believing her words, he decides to set her up in his secluded lake house. Sharon arrives, ready to begin the setup for the show. However, something interesting comes up. Andy has gone public. Mary Beth and Rand rescind their love for Nick, believing he is involved in the disappearance of Amy. Things have just gotten really complicated. Notwithstanding, Nick decides to go on with the show. Desi takes Amy to the lake house, showing her around the exquisite place. Assuring her of her safety, he says,
"Cameras everywhere. The exterior, all along the grounds, the entryway. Anyone who is caught coming or going will be recorded."
It's quite obvious Amy isn't expecting this. Well, Desi has lost her before, and he doesn't plan to let her get away again. The next evening, Nick rushes to Margot's house so they could watch the show together. It's the perfect piece, and Nick even gives Amy a direct message at the end, urging her to come home so they could fix their marriage. Amy and Desi also watch this, and she's truly impressed by Nick's play. The public are going crazy with love for Nick since he admitted the truth, just like Tanner said. However, before Margot and Nick can celebrate their victory, police cars swarm the neighborhood. Due to the tip call Amy made, Rhonda has gotten a warrant. When they break open the woodshed, they see the items. Rhonda says,
"I have treated you more than fair throughout this entire investigation. I gave you the benefit of the doubt over and over."
Nick tries pleading his innocence, insisting he never put the items there, but the evidence is staring them right in the face, so nobody believes him. Margot is arrested for aiding and abetting. Meanwhile, Desi pulls Amy off from her obsession with the story. He wants her to move on, assuring her he'll move in the next day so they can figure everything out together. From the look on Amy's face, her wheels are definitely turning with a plan for Desi. Nick arrives at the station with Tanner for an interrogation. Rhonda shows him Amy's diary, placing some photocopied pages on the table for Nick to confirm the truth in the words, he admits the ones from the early stages of their marriage, but denies the lies Amy concocted later on. The club comes back in from forensics, and the blood on it matches Amy's. With this, Rhonda tells him he is under arrest, leaving him devastated. 2 weeks later, Amy has grown comfortable with Desi. However, her plan with him begins. Before he leaves in the morning, she kisses him roughly to draw blood, then tousles his hair before pulling out his tucked-in shirt. Desi is surprised by this, but leaves anyway, fixing himself outside the door, which Amy sees on camera. After making sure he's truly gone, Amy continues her plan. She ties her ankle with ribbon, wets her nightgown and thighs, then crawls to a particular edge by the glass door, faking a horrible scream like she's been molested and is in so much pain. The lady would definitely pass for an actress alongside her writing career. Nick is finally granted bail. 8 days later, Amy still continues her carefully crafted plan, using a rope to make bold lines on her wrist. Taking a wine bottle, she roughly uses it on herself. Seems like she's setting up the stage just like she did for Tommy. When Desi comes home that night, she leads him to the bedroom, hot for a passionate time. They begin, and she urges him to go harder. The unsuspecting man does, and just as he's on the verge of release, she brings out a box cutter from under the pillow and slashes his neck. She holds him down, blood spraying all over her body, making sure he finishes inside her, and that sadly becomes the end of Mr. Loverboy. The next day, Nick steps outside the house and is surprised to see Amy coming down from a car in a bloodstained dress. The paparazzi go crazy with this new development, and when Amy hugs Nick, he quietly insults her. However, Amy just makes sure to put on a show. In the hospital, Amy opens up about her version of the story. She makes Desi out to be a kidnapper and assaulter. Rhonda tries to point out some things in the whole situation that don't make sense, but Amy plays the victim so well that the chief dismisses Rhonda, believing Amy without a doubt. Nick is given the clear to take her home, and they leave the hospital, reporters taking pictures of this miracle. When they arrive home, Nick urges her to stop the pretense, but Amy says,
I'm not pretending. You are perfect. The Nick I saw on TV, that's the Nick I fell in love with.
He wants to know what exactly happened, and she tells him to take off his clothes, wanting to be sure he isn't wearing a wire. Afterward, he joins her in the shower. He tells her he's leaving once everything settles down, but Amy points out how the media would take him down for it. He won't be able to recover from this one, and she promises to make sure no one will forget the pain he caused her. Nick doesn't want any involvement, but Amy just tells him to sleep on it. The next day, they grant an interview where Amy makes Nick pretend to kiss her on the cheek, all a show for the numerous cameras. Some days later, Nick, Margot, Tanner, and Rhonda debate over the issue. Nothing else can be done, so Tanner just gives Nick some advice before leaving for his city. Rhonda's hands are also tied since the feds have taken over the case, and they're done with it. Several weeks later, Nick continues staying with Amy with no other choice, though he sleeps in a separate bedroom. He definitely doesn't trust her one bit. They're having an interview with Ellen later on, and she wants him to admit 3 things: the credit cards, the items at Margot's shed, and the push. She feels she'll need them to feel safe. Afterward, Ellen arrives, all smiley, despite the fact she was actively slandering Nick on her show. When he goes up to get Amy, she gives him a gift. Nick can't believe what he's seeing. It's a positive pregnancy test. Nick is confused because he hasn't touched her since she came back, but she hints at the sperm he gave at the fertility hospital. With so much anger, he hits her head on the wall, cursing at her, but she just says,
I'm the cunt you married. The only time you liked yourself was when you were trying to be someone this cunt might like. I'm not a quitter. I'm that cunt.
Nick is well and truly stuck in this sham of a marriage. Later, Margot cries out, unable to bear the thought that Nick will be stuck with Amy for the next 18 years when their child becomes an adult. There's no other way around it, and he has no other choice. On the bed, he strokes her head, soliloquizing,
What are you thinking? How are you feeling? What have we done to each other? What will we do?
And that, my friends, is how it ended. If you've made it to the end, hit the like button, comment, and share. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next recap.